Hi there, I'm really excited about this video because it's super geeky and super long. So strap in, grab a beer, soda pop, whatever's your poison, give your old lady a squeeze, hunker down, and let's get to it. This is about cutting through the mix. It's a visual guide to cutting through the mix. Not a how-to, but actually you're going to see a guitar sound, and we're going to deconstruct it in the lows, the mids, the highs, and listen to them all separately, and it will help you hear and visualize what's going on when you're dialing in that guitar sound, and it will help you cut through. What does cutting through actually mean? Well, when I say cutting through, I really just mean being heard over the drummer. At the end of the day, if you have a heavy-hitting drummer, which everybody has, you'd end up trying to crank up the volume to be heard over the drummer, but that's not how you do it. Because the drummer basically covers a lot of sonic territory, a ton of it. They've got the lowest of the lows that fight with the bassist, and the highest of the highs that will fight with the highest note that your vocalist has. So as you're dialing in your tones and you're imagining yourself a guitar hero and playing with the band, you're probably dialing in a lot of your tones in your mom's basement, in the room that your wife lets you play guitar in, or even with headphones on. And there's some weird things about human hearing that screw that up. So we're going to talk about some basic principles in developing a tone, and maybe one day we'll come back to how to set up a tone in the environment that you're in. So to start, it's really important to know a little tiny bit about human hearing. And so here we have the entire frequency spectrum where conversational speech is, around 250 hertz, all the way up to maybe, 6,000, give or take. And it's in this area, really more like 500, 700, up to maybe 4,000, that we are most sensitive in our hearing. So softer sounds in this area will be perceived as louder, and you will be able to perceive even softer and softer tones in this area. So, around 2,000, you can hear something at a very low decibel. At 4,000, you can hear something as low as 10 decibels, which is below whispers. And it's interesting because our speech is kind of split up with the consonants, like these sounds kind of live up here. The sibilants kind of sounds in the pops. And then our vowels, ah, e, o, ah, sit lower in the frequency range. So you kind of have a hump around 500 to 750, and another one from like 3,000 to 4,000. So understanding our hearing and understanding that the guitar kind of occupies the same frequencies as the human voice, we can kind of figure where we really want to focus our attention when trying to cut through a mix. And that's this range, give or take, 750 to 4,000, really more like 2,000 to 2,500, 3,000, something like that. So I'm going to show one more little chart, and that's this one here. This is the threshold of hearing, and you see all the way by about 2,000, you have a very, very, very low threshold. But the low frequencies, like 50, 60, which, guitars are making sounds that low. You have to get up to maybe 80, 90 decibels, which is really loud, really, really loud, just to hear it. So our bedroom levels tend to be below the threshold where you can actually hear these sub-low frequencies. And once you get up to like a 50-watt amp, you're really approaching the pain threshold, which is important because at the end of the day, if you're playing a 50-watt amp and you're standing 12 feet away, you're way, way, way past where permanent hearing damage happens. If you think that's cool, then great, but something to keep in mind. So let's look at the patch that we're working on right now. What I did is I have this 2204. It's a Marshall off-roids, which means it's not that new Line 6 modded version. And I just want to add an EQ. So I added an EQ, and it's the Calligraphic. This is the Mesa Boogie EQ. In one sound, we killed the mids at 750, lowered the mids at 2200, raised the highs, and raised up the lows. So this is a sound that pushes up the highs, pushes up the lows, which kind of makes up for our hearing, right? It's pushing the sounds that we don't hear quite as well higher and scooping out the mids a little bit. So that's what we're going to call our scooped sound. This is going to sound huge because you're going to get lots of bottom and lots of top, and then the mids are going to be kind of like even because we perceive them as a little bit louder. The second voice, I actually pushed the mids. So what we do is create a mid bump, and we're going to kill the lows a little bit. So it's the complete opposite. This kind of looks like the shocker here. Anyway, so those are the two sounds. We're going to call this mid bump, and the other one we're going to call scooped. Let's move over to this wonderful, wonderful piece of software called Adobe Audition. This is generally used for video editing and doing very modest sound creation in the Adobe Creative Suite. And I want to show you a drum track. My eyes suck, so I got to get close to the screen. Hold on one second. I don't think it's there. I got to open it up. Okay, let's open it up. You get to see everything that's going on. Oh my God, breaking the fourth wall. Where are my drum traps? Here's a drum track. All right. So this is a drum track. What are we looking at here? The lows are here, 0 hertz, 100 hertz, 200, all the way up to 20K, 20,000 hertz. So this is the entire range of human hearing. Where you see a brighter color or a more intense color, you have more sound pressure or higher decibels. So you're seeing a lot of sound energy down here where the kick drum is, and you're seeing the snare as well, which kind of sits in this like low mids area. And up here you got an obvious ride with quite a bit of energy way up at the sizzly parts. And you can hear it. Interesting thing, though, about drums, there's a very quick attack and a very quick decay. So you see a lot of gaps, right? You see all these darker spots, these vertical darker spots? That's kind of where everybody else fits in. It's virtually impossible for the bassist to compete against the first couple milliseconds of a kick drum. But after that, the bass kind of can be heard. So there's kind of this wave of energy coming from the drums, and then that interplays with the other instruments. So, a guitar can easily sit in here, and the high parts of the guitar sound actually kind of fill in the gaps where the cymbals are. It's something we don't think a lot about. But I think about it sometimes when I'm sitting in my chair putting helix patches together. So a lot of folks will always kill their guitar sounds all the way down to like 5K or 6K, and they'll kill all this energy up top. And they say, oh, it's squirrely or it sounds like sizzle. So what I want to do is actually take a guitar sound and listen to the pieces of it. I'm going to call this one Squirrels. So this is actually just like a guitar sound. And you hear what some people call the squirrels. Honestly, with the capture software and YouTube and your speakers, I don't know if you can hear it. But all this stuff up here sounds like frying eggs and bacon. So let's take the entire spectrum of this guitar sound and break it up into pieces. This is just the lows. Everything up to, 700, 750, and nothing above that. Let's take a listen. Just the fundamentals. Boring and muddy, right? Those upper harmonics is where all the life is, right? Now let's listen to just the mids. The mids is where everything comes together. The mids is the most important part. It's the part you're going to hear most. But if you cut the other pieces out, it sounds like it's coming through a cell phone. Take a listen. Sounds louder, doesn't it? It's not. It's not the same decibel level as the lows, but it sounds louder because you hear the mids better. Remember what we said about human hearing. All right. Now the squirrely bits. These are just the highs. This is just the super high energy, and the it's so low, and I'm gonna goose it up just so you can hear it. All right, take a listen. That's the sound, right? But a guitar sound without that sounds like crap. When you put it all together, you got your full sound. Pretty cool, right? I think it's pretty cool. So what about the bass guitar? Let's take a listen to the bass guitar. Here you see single note, and it's actually pretty cool. You see the banding. This is actually the fundamental, this second one, and you're getting a subharmonic, which is really cool, and they're getting all these harmonics going up, which is basically a doubling of the frequency, up, 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 all the way up. And you're getting energy for a really low note on a bass, all the way up into like the 3-4K, particularly on the attack. Of course, the sustain of the note is mostly just the fundamental, maybe 4 or 5 harmonics. These are, each one of these guys here is a harmonic. So let's take a listen. And this is really good because you saw the kick drum before. Boom, 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 boom. But this fills in the gaps in between those hits. And it's really nice the way that the bass and the drums work together. Now let's listen to 2 different guitar sounds. The ones we looked at before, right? The mid bump and the scoop. We'll start out with just the scoop here. So this is the scoop solo. It's going to be big and bold. Rock. This is the mama's basement sound. I mean, or my little tiny guitar room that I'm allowed sound. Here, look. It's got a big bottom end. It's got plenty of life and sizzle at the top. It's a full sound. And it's great when there's no other instruments around. Now all I need is a 500 millisecond delay and some wet echoes. All right. What happens when I break this sound up? Let's take a listen. Just the lows. There's plenty of lows. Big bottom, punchy. Now, here's just the sizzle. You need sizzle and steak. Let's raise it up. That's the top end. Now, the register that you play in changes this too. If you're playing a lot above the 12th fret, you're going to have a little more energy up there in the top. But it's still, like, your fundamentals are still kind of sitting in the mids. Your fundamental is like the frequency of the note you're playing. So if you're playing A 440, you're playing an A that's 440 hertz that sits down here. And then you get all the little harmonics that sit on top of it because the string vibrates all kinds of crazy different ways. So if you're playing up in higher registers, your fundamentals are up here. But you don't have fundamentals on a guitar at like 10K. So all of this energy is really just upper harmonics. Sounds terrible on its own, but when you put it in the mix, it's a nice little thing. And then here's the mids. This is where the main event is. You notice it's a little fizzy? We'll come back to it. Here's the whole sound. One last time. Now here's the mid bump sound. Sounds a little nasally, doesn't it? Amazing mediocre playing. So there's your mid bump and here's your scooped. What do you see? Immediately I saw all the energy in here got a lot darker when I went to the scooped one. And there's a lot more energy up here in the highs and in the lows, which are, kind of similar, but a little bit more in this scooped sound. So mid bump, way in the middle, and now the scooped sound. Pachow. Big difference. You can visually see where the energy in each of those sounds is. Now let's listen to them in a mix. First, I'm going to listen to the scooped sound in the mix. Take a listen. This is a terrible mix. Sorry about it. I've got a bass in there. We got a rhythm. I got a rhythm guitar. Listen to this. Amazing. Yeah. That's a little scoopy too, so it stays out of the way. All right. So anyway, here's the full mix with the scooped guitar. And you see a lot of energy down here. It's a little sparse in the middle. And this is what it's going to sound like. Zoom in so you can see it better. Bow. I can barely hear it. I mean, it's kind of like a fizzy mess. I just hear like static cling. And it's loud. I mean, it's got a pretty high volume in relation to the other things in the mix, and it just sounds like in the mix. Here's the mid bump one. Comes out at you. Go back to the scoopy one. The mid bumpy one. And that becomes really, really apparent when you just play the mids. So here's just the mids on the scoopy one. And now the mid bumpy one. You just hear the guitar more. Each guitar sound, one is not louder than the other. I mean, when you listen to them solo, they're all kind of sitting around minus 10 decibels. They're just all kind of hanging out there. So the loudness or the volume of each patch is about the same, but one can be heard and one can't. And that's because one is playing where biology made you hear better, and one is playing elsewhere to try to give it a big full sound. And then the cymbals and the bass are just kicking its butt all over the place. And that's what's happening in a mix. So let's recap. What do we have here? We have a guitar sound. Don't let anybody tell you that a guitar cabinet cannot create frequencies above like 4 or 5 or 6K. It absolutely can. Look at the recordings. That sounds there. You might want to keep it because if you're playing with cymbals in a certain way, it might fill in a little bit. Consider keeping the squirrels if you're playing with others, or you're staying in a mix or recording with some drums or something like that. The lows are fantastic, but are going to get eaten alive by the bassist and the kick drum. So don't worry so much about the lows. You need them to have a good full sound, but you don't go crazy with the lows when you're trying to put things into a mix. The highs give you your life and the vibrance to your sound, but too much treble is going to get eaten away by the cymbals, so you're not going to get that punch from too much treble in your sound. It's really the zone between, give or take, 600 and say 4K. What you do there, and there's a lot of different things you can do in that zone, but what you do there matters most when you're playing with other musicians. So that's cutting through. That's deconstructing the guitar sound and listening to them bit by bit, piece by piece. A little bit about the squirrels. And this Adobe Audition is available in the Adobe Creative Suite. If you do photography stuff, it comes with all of it. It's actually a nice little piece of software where you can kind of visually evaluate your patches, which is kind of cool. I hope you learned something. I enjoyed doing this. I enjoyed putting this stupid little mix together. I hope you didn't mind it too much. Until next time, take care of each other. Play well. Happy guitaring. Talk to you soon. Bye now.